So the first operating round ran through, and it went by pretty much as one would expect. All the stock prices dropped back one space, obviously because nobody had a train, but now everybody has a single two train. The only kind of decision that I had was with the Odessa train, how to lay the track. I laid it this way because taking out a loan, I could reach Yekaterinoslav and produce, well, taking out more than one loan and produce more quickly. So I think I'm not going to do that because it's going to be two loans, and I can produce more quickly, just as quickly, heading into Romania if I need to. So I'll do that. Other than that, I think everything's pretty much predetermined by the companies chosen, and I think other than maybe the Odessa company, it could be that this might have been a better choice as a starting company, or Voronezh, although that looks pretty iffy. But it strikes me that, hey, I want to use my Odessa bonus, you know. And after the second operating of the round, turn of the game, obviously not going to keep count throughout. Everybody again did more or less what was expected. Everybody moved forward with their. I'll finish doing this later because these damn things aren't as easy as chits. I have to say I don't like the blocks so far compared to chits, and it's gonna. I guess there's a slight advantage, but there's these thicker ones for the major companies. The advantage there is the majors actually all run after the minors, kind of like 35, but I just don't like the tactile experience of the little wooden blocks as much. Anyway, a couple of decisions that had to be made. One of the big ones was that the Moscow, Moscow Kursk turned towards Voronezh. They could have gone towards Kharkov, but the problem is that the Kiev Kursk could have cut them off from Kharkov and made it hard for them to connect. So they decided to go for the guaranteed slightly better money rather than try to compete for Kharkov. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. We'll see. But it seems like early income is usually important in these games. And then the Odessa Kiev, they took out a loan, and that cost them $5 additional. They have to pay interest of $5 every turn, and they have to repay the loan as soon as they possibly can to hook up to Romania so that they could get a run, so that they didn't fall behind. I think that's the best move in their case, because they would have otherwise been behind a turn on their stock prices. And I think it's important to get to that yellow space where you can start floating the public companies with your miners. All right. Piles of cash. The paper money in this is so awful. It's so tiny that it's hard and not very easy to separate. Maybe if I crinkle it a bit, it'll be better, but it's pretty bad in this one. As far as I know, unlike 1856, I can take out as many loans as I can physically hold at once. So I can take a big loan. I'll look that up to make sure, because I've been wrong about a number of things. But I can grab that all in one loan. So it's not that big a deal that you have to pay off loans as soon as you can. The cash is available whenever you need it. All right. Well, on to the stock round, and we'll see how things fall and where the cash went. Obviously, the guy without a private ended up with very little money, so he's going to do very little. Whereas the guy with the Nikolaev has probably enough to start another miner right away. I'm not sure who else does, but we'll see what shakes out. So I lied. No big shock there. The guy who won the Nikolaev had 95 bucks, not enough to bid on anything. Now, one thing I want to point out, I didn't point this out before, when I play solitaire, for whatever reason, counterclockwise. So the order of play swings this way. I may have made a mistake because one of the weirdnesses in this, when you make a bid, if you win a bid, the priority goes to the person supposedly on your left, but actually in my case on the right, or whatever. In the next person in play gets the priority to make the next bid. Anyway, what we've seen is that all the miners have sold out, and that's 10 of them, which means all the 2 trains will disappear this time unless something very weird happens. And it would have to be very weird because I don't think you can even sell trains at this point, not that you'd really want to. So we've got, starting at 120, the Kharkov Rostov, which looked like a decent line. The big winner was the Moscow Voronezh. Definitely looks like the best of the line. Well, they're actually equal right now, both at 60. But I think Moscow is probably valuable in this game. I haven't looked at the later tiles. Yeah, sue me. And that also went for 120. That was actually the first one put out. What do we see otherwise? Well, the only other one that went out was the Riga Orel, and that only went for 100. And that starts up here. Basically, there was one other player up here with the St. Petersburg Warsaw who had enough cash to start a company, but there's nothing he can buy. He can't buy any of these shares. In fact, they can only be started at $140, 70 bucks a share. So he wouldn't have had enough anyhow had they been available, but they're not available until the 4 trains come out. And it could well be, see, they can only start where there's an empty dot. So if they're starting as a float, and they're not fixed to a location at all, which is very different from every other game in the 18XX series I've seen. The major corporations, they can start anywhere on the board, but well, this is kind of like 2038 in a sense, but 2038 comes with a home base anyway. They can start anywhere on the board, which is either through advancing one of these minor companies into a corporation, or through a merger, or finally, and mergers will be available very shortly because we're going to see connections actually happening. So far that hasn't happened, but now the companies can actually, the little minor companies can connect, and there might be a merger happening. I don't think anybody's got the good situation there. So the MK is not owned by the same guy who owns the MV, for example. That would have been kind of a cool setup if they had been able to manage that. Now, they had the ability to get 2 trains, but they didn't get it. Likewise, the KB and the KK are owned by different players. As soon as those 2 sell out, and the first 3 is bought, which might be a while, because there's exactly enough 2 trains for every company to have one. So until somebody's willing to spring for a second one, and most of those first companies that made good money, like say the Nikolaev, don't really have a way to use another train right away. You're going to have to pull those green tiles out to see how valuable breaking off and getting a second train will be. Anyhow, back to whatever I was babbling about. So yeah, we're definitely seeing something that's very different from any XX game that I've ever played before. So it's fairly exciting for me. And remember, I got those loans to play with too. So it may be possible. The 3 train is expensive though. That's not going to go with a loan, so somebody might get screwed. All right. Yeah. So I pulled out the green tiles, and they're filled with all the track that you always wanted but never had in 1830. And most of the games I've played, I haven't seen some of these anywhere. there's some neat pieces, and the cities are also equally more options than just your special K and your X for both the Y and the normal cities. The Ys are just improved cities, basically. I don't know what effect that's going to have on play. I'm not used to thinking in terms of having the track that I want that I can never have. But yeah, that's going to make it for an interesting game. Okay, another UGG moment. I forgot about this rule. I'm gonna play with it now and just live with it. But you're allowed to lay 2 tracks in this, kind of like 1870, except it costs 20 rubles to do so. And the extra track has to be a yellow track lay. It can't be an upgrade. So Nikolaev took the hose maneuver right off the bat. It didn't cost them a swallow. They got to pay out their earnings and still buy a second 2 train. I think that's for the best for them. But that means at least one of these companies is going to be minus a train. So this is more deliciously harsh than I thought. Not only did the Nikolaev buy an extra train, but the Moscow Kursk bought an additional train because they saw, hey, the Rika Orel is only got $100. They're not going to be able to buy a train right off the bat. They're going to be the ones who are hosed. The 2 other companies had 120 that started. So if I'm going to be the one that's hosed, I might as well buy a second train ahead of time with the Moscow Kursk. So I did a swallow with them and bought a train. And now I come up to the Kharkov Rostov. And that doesn't have a train. It doesn't have $225. It can't raise that much, barely, because with the loans, it can only get up, it'll get 90 for 2 loans. It's got 120 on board, so that only puts it up to 210. Not quite enough. So it's going to have to buy a train off the Moscow Nizhny Novgorod, which then, with that pile of money and its own money, and a falling back, next time we'll have enough money to buy a 3 train. But we're also going to see the same situation, I believe. No. So that's all the companies I think are accounted for once that happens. Alright. Okay, so that's the end of the second operating round there, 4th overall. Wow. Lots happened. Not anything on the train front. The trains all stayed the same. But a couple of companies took out loans so they could build extra track lays. And, well, of course, the Moscow Nizhny Novgorod, that train didn't stay the same. It was the first 3 train come out, and that took a loan to afford, along with whatever cash was off the Kharkov Rostov. However, it's hard to almost express everything that happened. I probably should have stopped mid-turn to catch things. We got people buying private companies now and getting the benefit off of them. Got another one up here. The 2 Moscow, oh no, that's the Polish Railway as well. Some upgrades going on. Moscow, Kiev, both upgraded for value, as did a number of other locations. We had double track lays into upgrades just to make sure that you couldn't be cut off. A lot of neat options in this game. I looked at mergers. There's no possibility of a merger at this point without working with someone else. I don't think anybody wants to do that. I'm kind of questioning how valuable mergers really are anyway. We're already seeing the Nikolaev is going to turn into a real company come next turn, a corporation, assuming they want to, of course. That's a hard call because you're trading in you've got the same holding with the Nikolaev. You're going to be producing the same amount of money per turn total, but right now you pull 50% of that in and 50% goes in the treasury. Once you make a corporation, that switches to 80%. So making it a corporation gives you less capital into your own pocket to start more privates and, well, to start more miners. So I don't know if that's going to happen. Anyway, we're going to go to the stock round and we'll see what people decide to do. There are now another set of, 6 more minor companies left. 1, 2, 3, 4. I count 6. I think that's right. 6 more minor companies left to go on the board. Wow. It's a cluttered game of tiny railroads right now. I really like the way the mergers and the escalating into a corporation. I like the way that sounds. I don't know how much I like. I don't know how likely it is to be a good strategy. But one problem. These miners, I don't think they're allowed to survive the whole game. Well, yes, they are. 6 to 8, they're allowed to. So, you could keep running them. Now, obviously, once they hit 165, you want to be making stock value off your companies. So, it probably doesn't make sense to keep them as a miner all game. But it may not make sense for, say, the Nikolaev to convert over right away. It's producing good money right now. Of course, it's got a limited amount of trains that it can hold.